Alright, welcome to this lesson on creating a new project. And of course, since we'll be working on projects, I'm going to demonstrate from start to finish how to go about working in Kubernetes and then using and creating pods, creating clusters, and then creating load balancers and working with your app. And then of course our deployments of our app as well, configuring external IP addresses and so forth. So there's a whole lot more to this. I'm going to walk you step by step into these projects. So we'll do several samples that are provided to us by Kubernetes, and of course then we'll create our own as well. So in this lesson, starting off, I'm going to just show you how to create a new project. Okay, so once you're logged into the Google shell, let's go ahead and take a look at our existing infrastructure. So let's go to the gallery here. And let me go ahead and click on the compute engine. I just want to see the VMs right now. So right now we only have the one Ubuntu machine that we've been working on so far. Perfect. Now Kubernetes can run on a range of platforms, right? From your laptop to VMs on a cloud or to a rack of bare metal servers, you name it. So it's just a matter of taking the time out and configuring Kubernetes on those platforms. So for example, if you're running on a cloud, you could use AWS, you could use Giant, you could use Rackspace. If you want to run Kubernetes on premise VMs, you can use Vagrant, you can use CloudStack, VMware, and so on. Okay. Similarly, if you want to run on bare metal, you can use Fedora, Ubuntu, CentOS, and so forth. So there's a whole wide variety of platforms that you can run Kubernetes on. Now within Google Cloud Platform, Kubernetes is built in to the container engine. Okay, so let me go back here to the gallery, bring up the container engine. So this is the Kubernetes hosted environment. Okay, now it doesn't really say anywhere the word Kubernetes here. Okay, so I know this may be something very new to you, but I'm going to show you in fact how to access Kubernetes right from our cloud shell. But it doesn't really give you any option here. There are no menu options of Kubernetes on the gallery or on the menu here or anywhere. So there are no settings which says Kubernetes. Okay, so it's a back-end process. I'm going to demonstrate how to create a project first, and then of course in subsequent lessons as we move along we'll create clusters and access the GUI interface of Kubernetes. So keep that in mind. But in this lesson I'm just going to create a new project, and this project that we'll be working on, what we'll do is use WordPress Docker image. We'll just pull any public repository Docker image of WordPress, and we'll create a publicly accessible WordPress website. Okay, plain simple. And of course that's going to be backed up by the MySQL database running inside the Google container engine. So we'll of course create pods, we'll put containers in those pods, and then we'll configure them. Okay, so the project itself is on a macro level just creating a WordPress website right on Google Cloud Platform using a Docker image. So let's start. Before I actually get detailed into the different areas in this lesson, I'm going to stick to creating a project, but I do want to mention our objectives as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new project. Click on the gallery, let's go home, and here's my dashboard, and I have several projects, right? So if I click on the drop down arrow under my name here, notice there are two different projects that exist already, and of course the one with the check mark says side, and this is the current project I'm working on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create a project, and this is going to bring up a dialog box, and I'm going to call this project Claydesk. And of course it gives me the project ID as Claydesk-1380. Now of course I can edit this if I need to give a different ID, because this ID will eventually be part of the URL and so forth, and it'll stick to your project. Okay, so you can change the ID or leave it as is. You can also click on some advanced options and of course select the App Engine location, whether it's going to be US Central, Europe West, or US East. But we'll configure this later as we move along. So I'm going to leave the project ID as 1380 as is. I'm going to go ahead and click create. And Google Cloud Platform goes to work, and notice once it is created, I'll get a notification that a new project has been created. If I click on the notification tab, it says that it's creating a project called ClayDesk. And once it's created, it brings up the dashboard. And here, notice I can click on the drop down, and here's my project. So the project ID is ClayDesk 13-1380, and it also assigns the project number. So let's click on home, bring up the gallery here, and let's go ahead and click on admin. And the reason why I'm on this page is because I want to make sure that we have the permissions, right, for the project ClayDesk to all of its resources. Perfect. If I click on all projects, it's going to list all of these projects, and here's our new project that we just created. So in this lesson, I just want to demonstrate how to go about and create a project using Google Cloud Platform. So as a practice task, go ahead, log in, and then just simply go ahead and create a project. You can give it any name you like. In this lesson, moving forward, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a cluster. So we'll be primarily working with the container engine within the Google Cloud Platform, and I'll demonstrate how to go about creating a cluster using the Cloud Shell. But first, let's just take a look at our existing infrastructure. So let me navigate to the products and services and click on the compute engine just to make sure that our VMs are listed. So at this point, there is no VM for our new project that we created in the previous lesson. So right here is a new project called ClayDesk, and of course, if I click on the drop down arrow, there are other projects as well. Let me quickly show you before I create the VM instance. So let's click on the project called Site 5757, and notice in this instance you will see a VM called Ubuntu created, and this is something that we've been working on throughout so far in previous lessons. However, when I switch to my new project here, ClayDesk 1380, I will need to create another VM instance. So let's go ahead and create an instance. I could of course use the Google Cloud Shell to create the instance just like I did previously, but this time let's go ahead and use the VM instances, and let's click on create instance, and this brings up the name of the instance, and I'm going to call this ClayDesk VM, and of course lowercase as well. Alright, zone, I'm going to pick US East 1C, and then the machine type. I can pick any other machine type if I like, and of course it shows me that you'll be charged this much, but we have a free trial, so not to worry. But I can customize this, so if I click on customize, it shows me how many cores I want, the memory I can increase or reduce. So I'm going to click on basic view, just leave as is. The boot disk is the type of VM I want to use, so I'm going to go ahead and click on change, and I'm going to use the Ubuntu 16.04 LTS. That's the one that we used for our other projects as well. Of course, you're welcome to use any one of these if you like. So I'm going to select this, click on select, scroll down. For my firewall, I can add tags and firewall rules to allow specific network traffic from the internet. So I can allow the regular HTTP traffic and of course the secure traffic as well. And once I'm done, simply click create, and it's going to spin off a virtual machine for me. Perfect. So it shows me that it's created the ClayDesk VM, zone, the machine type, the internal IP, and of course our external IP address, and I can connect using the SSH shell to this VM. So let me go ahead and in fact click on this, and this brings up the shell window, and I can provide various commands within the shell. Perfect. So just wanted to show you that we can connect to this VM now. So I'm going to close this for now. Click on leave, and of course on my notification, notice it says that it's created a VM instance called ClayDesk VM, and its boot disk is ClayDesk VM. All right, so once our VM is created, let's go back to our gallery here. I'm going to click on the container engine. This is where we actually create our clusters, right? So let me get rid of this notifications here. All right, so right now there's no cluster, and of course if I click on the container registry, which provides a secure private Docker repository storage, nothing is here as well. Great. Let's bring up our Cloud Shell. Okay, now the fun part begins. So let me connect to the Cloud Shell, since we already have a VM created, and we also created a new project. So I'm going to work on the Cloud Shell here. All right, once we're in the shell, I'm going to go ahead and create a cluster, and that's basically our first step. So what is a cluster, right? It's just a group of different instances. So a cluster consists of, let's say, a single master instance and a set of worker nodes. And the master and the worker node is simply a compute engine virtual machines. And the number of worker nodes is specified at the time of creation of this cluster. So I can tell Google Cloud that I'm interested in creating 5 instances that work within this cluster, or 10, or whatever. In order for me to create a cluster, let's first go ahead and verify and take a look at our time zones. So I'm going to say gcloud compute zones list, and it's going to go ahead and show me the existing zones. So let me go ahead next and set a zone. So I'm going to go ahead and do our gcloud command and config set compute zone. And by the way, we set the zone already for the VM, right? I can always change it if I need to. And this zone is going to be US Central. All right, I'm going to pick Central 1. Make sure our spellings are correct for Central. And this is going to be -A, right? That's the one I'm going to pick. Hit the enter key. All right, so it sets the time zone. And next, obviously, is the command to actually go ahead and create the cluster. All right, so to create the cluster, I'm going to say gcloud. Make sure my spellings are correct again, right? Container, the word clusters with an S, create, and then of course the name of the cluster that I want to create. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say it's called Claydesk-1, or maybe say Claydesk-app, right? All right, so gcloud container, make sure my spellings are correct again, right, before I hit the enter key. So this is going to be A-N-I-E-R. All right, great. So gcloud container clusters create, and then of course the name of the cluster. Now by default it's going to create 3 nodes, and it's going to run on the standard machines, right? NS standard-1. Otherwise I can specify the number of nodes as an optional arguments. So let's hit enter, and the creation of the cluster Claydesk-app begins. Now while this cluster is being created, okay, so you get the big picture, right? You get the idea, right? Kubernetes is going to take these clusters, right, create pods, and pods contain containers, right, those Docker images into containers, and then containers go into pods. And that's how Kubernetes basically manages those containers for you. And it provides like fault tolerance services. You can create labels, and we'll take a look at what those are as we move along, but just so you get the big picture. All right, great. So once our cluster is created, notice it provides a name of the cluster, which is Claydesk-app, the zone, US Central 1-A, the master version 1.3.2, and of course provides the master IP address for the cluster, name of the machine, the N1-standard-1, and then the node version, and the number of nodes is 3, right? So here, notice it says 3 nodes, and the status is running. So it creates these 3 nodes or VM instances in other words. Okay, so if I were to go back to my console and verify by going to the products and services gallery, let's click on Compute Engine, and I should be able to see the 3 VMs, right? So let me scroll down here, bring them up. Perfect. Okay, so here's our original CLEDESK VM, right? And these are the 3 that were created for this particular CLEDESK-app. And our CLEDESK VM was created in the Eastern time zone, whereas our 3 instances for the cluster are in the Central time zone. And of course, 3 machines, IP addresses, and I can SSH into each one of these and work with them just like I would in a regular VM. I can also go into the networking area. So for example, let's go to the networking here within the compute section. And this also shows me the networks that I have, right, of all the instances. I can click on, let's say, the IP routes. Take a look at the default IP routes here. Firewall rules, I can set those up, and we'll be working with these as we go along, but just to show you and give you an idea of how to go about creating a cluster. And once we have the cluster, then we can put pods within those cluster, right? And pods, of course, contain multiple containers. Great. So in this lesson, I just wanted to show you how to create a cluster using the Cloud Console and the Cloud Shell. So practice, and let's move to the next lesson.